Levi, let's go!
Working on an animated production, it's quite a long time that you are making the show. I think we had an 80-week schedule from when we started the writer's room to delivering the last episode. And then when we go to a streamer, they have to cook it for 3 months or so with, closed captioning and prepare it for getting on the service. So it just feels like we've been waiting. We've had this like secret to show the world for a while, and when the trailer came out, it was the start of that process, and people can see what we were working on. This is all very exciting. Yeah, we're really hoping people like it.
And what most exciting one is Joe cut that trailer, and I think Joe had this vision for it. He wanted it to feel really different, and I think it does. And I think the audience, at least from the comments and the fact that it's getting a lot of viewership, it seems like it's hitting on a subconscious nerve, like, oh, this feels different on just a tonal level, and that's what we want to get out of the show. Ah!
I'm ready to get out of here.
Yeah, of course. I mean, Charles and I had been, we'd made a couple shorts together, collaborated on a couple shorts together. We'd been posting shorts online just of just random, random ideas and stories. And then someone from Adult Swim had reached out and said, do you want to make something with us? It would be obviously short form, but I, of course, really excited about the idea and was really into what Adult Swim was doing. And so I pitched this kind of, and I think it initially just started where it was like, I was thinking a lot about kind of like Rube Goldberg machines and cause and effect and like, and the idea of, creating a world that has these kind of made up symbiotic relationships, and that's my headspace was just in that whole kind of world. And I remember when I pitched it, it was extremely rough. I mean, so rough that I think that the reaction, the guy that I was talking to was just kind of like, I have no idea what the hell this is, but I think he was, but it was just such a, small, like chump, peanuts project that like, it just didn't matter. It was like, okay, great, sure. We had a tiny budget but it allowed me to, I reached out to Charles and asked if he wanted to get on board, and we were throwing around kind of like some ideas for the look of it and that sort of thing. And the look of the short is a bit different than the show, but there's definitely a lot of overlap, and I think Charles's backgrounds are a really good example of that. He's got a pretty strong vision for that look, and so we were going back and forth, and I was thinking a lot about the idea of like, kind of creating a visual narrative that doesn't have any dialogue. That I think I was very allergic to like any kind of exposition through dialogue. I mean, I even wanted to pitch the show with no dialogue, and which didn't happen, obviously. But and I'm kind of glad about it now. But anyways, yeah, we started developing the short, and I reached out to some friends that because it was such a low budget thing. I mean, it was just sort of like buddies that I'd been working with in the past that were almost kind of doing favors for me, and so they would take on a scene or whatever. So we cobbled it together and made it. Yeah.
I'd just say I wasn't there for the pitch process, but I can imagine Joe's boards for Scavengers, because there's a lot of stuff on our current show where it's like an idea that you could only get across if you drew it and you described it and you went through the whole song and dance of how it works. And he's doing that now. It's like very surreal sequences on this new show. And it's the same thing. We're like, okay, it's going to be this ball rolling, and then it's going to sprout these little tendrils, and the tendrils are going to wrap around the stick.
And it really was like, I mean, describing every little kind of element of it was like, you just got to thumbnail it out in order to do it. And I mean, I think the cool thing about the short too was that, like, when we turned it in, I think that the network just had zero expectation, because I think they had just moved on. They weren't thinking about it. So nobody was kind of like, really overseeing it or being super hands-on about it, which is great. I mean, because it just allowed us to sort of like rethink things over and over and just fine-tune as much as we want. I was thinking a lot about sort of, the ASMR world and all that stuff, as much as that kind of stuff that I could kind of put in there. And also, these characters who are, some of the characters in the show are sort of like loosely based off of, but not really, but that they're using these things in this world as like a utility. There's a functionality to it that they've figured out. And so a lot of going from the short to the series was trying to carry a lot of that stuff over. It's like, how do you have it where these characters can, utilize these things in whatever needs they have. Challenging, very, very challenging. There were constant obstacles, and it was super arduous, but it's also fun. And I think it was a lot of it was kind of it's funny that like kind of part of the themes in the Scavengers is like characters that either resist or go with the flow, or they resist. And I think there's a lot of that that just was my experience in the process of like just control and how much control I wanted over these things. But when you're working at something at such a big scale, there's only like so much control you can have. It's such a big machine, and it's just pivoting. It's like moving a big ship or something, it's and I feel like I just had to kind of get used to that. Charles as well, that we just had to sort of like get over, for me, the first thing was like, okay, the characters are going to be talking. That is, I am going to have to deal with dialogue and then just kind of one after another. Then it was like, okay, the style is going to shift a little bit, or and yeah, it was very exciting. I got so lucky with how the crew that I was working with, it was a big, a lot of international artists that worked on the show, and a lot of people that are just so talented, so it was just, it was a real honor to work with them. And I think that a lot of these people kind of brought their own ideas to the table. And so it was, I think when I started to just go with the flow and roll with it, it was getting easier.
Well, I'd say those two things, it's like ran concurrently through the entire production. And in the writing, a lot of it was like going with the flow, figuring out what boundaries you want on it so it doesn't veer into like what has been done before in science fiction or what has been done before in animation. And same thing with the actual animation production. It was always just checking against like, is this just what's already been done before, or are we like feeling our way through it in a way that feels honest for the project? And it was such a great balancing act. And I think Joe and Charles, their leadership on just making sure our goalpost was set in the right direction, and then everyone could kind of like flow within that channel.
Yeah, well put.
You know, Green Street Pictures is our studio, and we incorporated a while before this project got greenlit, but when it got greenlit, it was off to the races. Came on at the beginning of the writing process, was friends with Joe forever, loved Joe, loved his work, thought he was such a genius, so was very excited and thrilled to be part of the process. And it was kind of just had blinders on from, I think it was August 2021 until delivering the show earlier this year. It was a lot of, it's like Joe said, like you're trying to tell a story that doesn't lean heavily on expositional dialogue. You have limited amount of characters. It's ostensibly a travel show going across this planet to their downed spaceship. So just finding the good story beats you want to hit and how you can have character movement inside, kind of, even though it's like a sci-fi alien planet with unlimited possibilities, it's like between the characters, we had to find what was exciting and what, could drive the story for 12 episodes. It's almost 6 hours of television, you know what I mean? So it was just like working with the other writers, and Sean, who's not here, is another partner at Green Street. And of course, Joe and Benji and Charles and just all of us together trying to like stops and starts and so many paths we went down that weren't feeling right, and then you just keep working it until it feels right, and then you're like, okay, fine, okay, so we got past episode 7, great, now what are 8 and 9, how are 8 and 9 going to lead to 10, 11, and 12, and kind of a step-by-step process. And luckily in animation, like you can keep, throughout those 80 weeks that I mentioned before, like you can do rewrites in week 60, like a little rewrite here and there. So that was very nice, but definitely took a lot of attention and a lot of just like working in. I feel like every member of the team was doing the same, constantly just trying to like work to the last second to make this the best it can possibly be and punch something in right at the last moment. And you would see just episodes get exponentially better throughout the process. And yeah, it was so fun.
And I would just add real quick, sorry, James, like just the sort of really pushing that kind of organic process, like to allow for these kinds of things to happen. A feeling that like nothing is set in stone until it really feels right, and we can shift things around in that second. I think that kind of sort of spontaneity and everything is what I think heightened a lot of those. There were scenes and things that didn't feel very good, and we were like, well, let's just try to refine as much as we can until the absolute deadline,
Yeah, and I'd say that's the joy of working at Green Street. I mean, I joined after Scavengers, but I'd known these guys for a long time. But watching like a small studio write a show, put together the plan for making a show, execute it, and then be so involved throughout the whole process of like what the DNA of it. It's such a rare thing to have happen on such an internal basis. And I think that's what's so great about every project we do, which is that everybody's so passionate about it, looking at it from all these angles. There's no outside perspective forcing anything at all. It's just all happening within this like community.
Beehive, yeah.
Who really care about the project and are only thinking about making decisions based on how it'll benefit the overall show. And there's just nothing, there's no negative influence in the process at all.
I mean, I will be honest. I don't think that myself or Charles thought about anything in terms of like genres, and I was more interested in. I was looking at a lot of like animal docs, and I was thinking about, you know, and I think that was kind of more of the direction I wanted to think about the nature on this planet more than anything. I think it just sort of by default fell into like a sci-fi genre, but you know, stylistically, I think a lot of this was we sort of came to this conclusion and the look of it, just thinking a lot about like texture. You know, I think that Charles's style lends itself to really revealing a lot of the texture on the planet in a very cool way, and I think that was that sort of lines up with the, you know, the ASMR stuff and all that stuff. But like there's a lot of sensorial elements to this planet, and yeah, I think we were just trying to like embrace that as much as we could.
And I'd say, Joe, you introduced a lot of like kind of left of center influences into like humanity in nature. We talked a lot about Last of the Mohicans, a lot about Sorcerer. Sorcerer,
yeah, exactly.
Revenant. I mean, it's just like people in nature and the challenges that they go through, less so than like Alien. We never really talked about Alien ever. It was always just like these more grounded narratives to make the show feel as grounded as possible.
Yeah.
One sci-fi movie in mind we did talk about a lot was Solaris. Like Solaris, 28 Days Later, Jurassic Park, we talked about a lot.
The funny thing is that a lot of this is like, most of it, I'd say, was like live action influence, you know. There was obviously, you know, we talked a little bit about like Nausicaa and things like that, but for the most part, it was like really, we were all just very inspired by a lot of like live action stuff. And yeah, I mean, as crazy as it sounds, like vintage, right? Like Last of the Mohicans, that's always been such a huge, like you know, or Michael Mann movies in general, such a huge influence for me. So I think it's really trying to like looking at movies like that and sort of breaking down the scenes that kind of carry a lot of like emotion and that sort of thing. I think we were it was funny how random the films were. There's also a live action Jungle Book from I think 1994. That was, I mean, that's what I grew up with. It was huge. And you know, it's just random, very random kind of.
Jumanji. What's your mind?
I remember Manchester by the Sea got talked a lot about in the spoilers, but there's maybe a thematic parallel there. But like we all rewatched that movie. I remember having like a weeks long discussion about that movie in particular.
And I'd say all of those live action film references were always like, they feel like the human emotional texture of it is right on the surface, and they're like really well observed. And whenever we talk to the animators, it would just be like trying to talk to an actor and trying to like bring out the performance that feels right for the scene. And that's how the writing happened too. It was just trying to be as honest about it as possible and not like tap into that reference point from this sci-fi trope or whatever, but just be, you know, live in the characters as much as possible.